Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we will unpack the devastating confrontation between Electra and Ivy Forrester. A violent collision of truth and betrayal that leaves Ivy dead on the showroom floor, and Electra's life fractured beyond repair. Let us begin with a quiet, heavy observation, rather than a strong reaction. Before the shouting started, before the terrible, sickening sound of skull-meeting marble, there was the lighting in the Forrester Creation showroom. It was impeccably staged, as it always is, a cool clinical luminescence designed to highlight the drape of expensive fabric and the illusion of perfection. I found myself staring at the shadows cast by the display pedestals, noticing the haunting sameness of the room. It is a space built for commerce, for beauty, for the endless cyclical churn of seasons and collections, yet today, it became a mausoleum. The contrast was striking a beautiful dissonance between the glossy, manufactured world of high fashion and the visceral, messy reality of human rage. Let's be honest about what we just watched. I am sitting here long after the episode has ended, the glow of the screen illuminating my living room in the quiet hours of the morning, trying to figure out why I still care. I pour another glass of wine and find myself wondering if anyone else feels this strange ache. We watch these characters not just as fictional archetypes, but as manifestations of human repetition of trauma, and the terrifying illusion of time standing still. They do not grow, they merely endure. And today, watching Electra Forrester shatter under the weight of an unbearable truth, I felt a profound sense of pity not just for her, but for all of them trapped in this gilded cage of their own making. The catalyst for this tragedy was ironically an act of moral courage. Daphne Rose, burdened by the immense, suffocating weight of a secret, finally broke. She told Electra the truth. She confessed the depths of Ivy Forrester's voyeuristic manipulations, the stolen letter, the discarded necklace, the meticulous orchestration of a breakup that was never supposed to happen. Daphne thought she was doing the right thing. She believed that truth is a cleansing fire, but in the world of daytime drama, truth is rarely a remedy. It is almost always a weapon, and as I watched Daphne unburden herself, I felt a familiar, melancholic dread settling in my chest, knowing that this honesty would not bring peace but absolute devastation. When Electra walked into the Forrester showroom to confront her aunt, you could see the psychological fracture happening in real time. The echo of her heels against the polished floor sounded like a countdown. She was a woman walking into the ruins of her own reality. For weeks, she had been agonizing over Will Spencer, believing he had abandoned her, believing her love was unrequited, and her grand romantic gestures had been callously ignored. The cognitive dissonance of realizing that her grief was manufactured, that it was handed to her by a family member she trusted, was written in the haunting sameness of her tear-streaked expression. She was not just angry. She was grieving the timeline that had been stolen from her. And there stood Ivy Forrester. I have spent years watching Ivy, analyzing her pathology, trying to understand the arrested development that plagues so many of the women in this fictional universe. When Electra confronted her, screaming through tears about the letter and the necklace, Ivy did not flinch. There was no apology. There was no sudden realization of the profound damage she had caused. Instead, Ivy doubled down. She looked at her niece with a chilling, unapologetic calm, and insisted that she did it for Electra's own good, that she was merely clearing the path for a better future with RJ Forrester. It is a terrifying thing to witness someone who is so fundamentally incapable of growth that they view their own sociopathy as an act of maternal grace. This is the generational disease of the Forrester family, isn't it? The Sisyphean task of trying to control the uncontrollable, of playing God with the hearts of the people they claim to love. Ivy's justification was rooted in a deep, twisted belief that she alone understood the architecture of Electra's happiness. It is a voyeuristic need to manipulate the board, to move the pieces until the picture looks right to her, regardless of the blood left on the floor. As I watched Ivy stand her ground, defending the indefensible, I felt a strange grief for her. She was a woman utterly trapped in her own cyclical need to interfere, unable to simply exist without meddling in the lives of others. The realization of this betrayal hit Electra with the force of a physical blow. You could see the exact moment the last tether of her sanity snapped. It dawned on me today, watching her face contort with a rage so pure and untethered, how much of this show is actually a horror story about people who are fundamentally incapable of escaping their own families. Electra realized in that sterile, brightly lit showroom that Will had not thrown her away. The love she thought was dead had actually been suffocated by the woman standing right in front of her. The years of my own life that have passed while watching this show suddenly felt heavy. A surreal grief of outgrowing a piece of media that refuses to outgrow you, as I watched yet another young woman destroyed by family secrets. The physical altercation was born not of a desire to harm, but of a desperate, suffocating need for space. Electra did not walk into that room intending to kill her aunt. She was a trapped animal cornered by a lifetime of lies, lashing out at the architect of her misery. When the shouting reached its agonizing peak, when Ivy's smug, unyielding righteousness became too much to bear, Electra pushed her. It was a violent, impulsive release of kinetic energy, a physical manifestation of the phrase to simply get away from me. But in this universe, actions do not exist in a vacuum. They are bound by the cruel, unforgiving laws of dramatic irony. I watched the push and the subsequent fall with a mix of fascination and dread. Time seemed to slow down, expanding to fill the silence between the shove and the impact. Ivy stumbled backward, her balance lost, her arms flailing in a futile attempt to catch herself on the empty air. It is in these split seconds that the illusion of control is entirely shattered. Ivy, who had spent weeks meticulously controlling every variable of Electra's life, suddenly had no control over her own body, her own trajectory, her own ending. The universe, it seems, has a dark sense of humor when it comes to those who play God. The back of Ivy's head struck the sharp, unyielding edge of a marble display pedestal. The very architecture of Forrester creations, the heavy, opulent stone, meant to elevate their designs, meant to project permanence, and wealth became the instrument of her demise. It was a beautiful, terrible dissonance. The sickening thud of bone against marble echoed through the vast empty showroom, a sound so final and abrupt that it seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. I paused the screen. I sat in the quiet of my own living room, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, struck by the sudden violent cessation of a character I have known for years. Ivy Forrester died instantly. There were no final words, no tearful apologies, whispered with a dying breath. No dramatic hospital bed reconciliations. There was just the impact and then nothing. The sudden stillness of her body on the polished floor was haunting. In daytime drama, death is often a prolonged, operatic affair filled with monologues and weeping families. But this was clinical. It was a senseless, stupid accident born of a petty argument over a stolen necklace. It highlighted how strangely tragic the show actually is beneath the gloss. They fight over fashion and boys, but the marble is real and the floor is unforgiving. Electra's reaction was a masterclass in psychological shock. She did not immediately scream. She did not rush to Ivy's side to perform CPR. She simply stood there frozen, staring down at the lifeless body of her aunt. And then slowly she raised her trembling hands to her face. I find myself wondering if anyone else felt the same cold knot in their stomach, watching her look at her own hands. In the span of 3 seconds, she had gone from a heartbroken, betrayed young woman to a killer. The innocence she had woken up with that morning was gone, replaced by a dark, indelible stain that will follow her for the rest of her fictional life. The blood began to pool beneath Ivy's head, a stark visceral red against the pristine white marble and the gleaming floor. It was a visual representation of the corruption that runs beneath the surface of the Forrester family. They drape themselves in silk and lace, they speak of legacy and beauty, but underneath it all there is always blood. The cognitive dissonance of watching this pristine fashion house turn into a crime scene is something I've never quite gotten used to despite decades of viewership. You are being emotionally manipulated by a team of writers who just need to fill 18 minutes of airtime, yet you cannot help but feel the heavy, oppressive weight of the tragedy. And then the door opened. Enter R.J. Forrester. The timing, of course, was impeccable, a cruel trick of the narrative designed to maximize the emotional carnage. R.J. walked into the showroom, perhaps expecting to find Electra, perhaps hoping to continue his patient calculated pursuit of her heart. Instead, he walked into a nightmare. The voyeur became the witness. R.J. stood in the doorway, his eyes darting from the blood on the floor to the lifeless body of his aunt, and finally, to the trembling, shattered figure of the woman he claims to love. R.J.'s psychology in this moment is fascinating and deeply tragic. He has spent weeks trying to position himself as Electra's savior, the patient. Understanding alternative to the volatile Will Spencer, he wanted to rescue her from her heartbreak. But as he looked at her standing over a corpse, he realized that the parameters of the rescue had drastically changed. He was no longer trying to win a girl, he was stepping into the role of an accomplice to a homicide. The sheer panic in his eyes was palpable, a stark contrast to the confident, entitled young man who had just been lecturing his father about boundaries. "I will get a lawyer," RJ said, his voice trembling, trying to inject some semblance of logic into an utterly illogical situation. The absurdity of the statement struck me deeply. A woman is dead on the floor, the blood is still expanding across the tile, and the immediate Forrester instinct is to manage the legal liability. It is a deeply ingrained pathology, the belief that money, influence, And a good attorney can fix anything, even death. RJ's promise was an attempt to regain control, to throw a tarp over the existential abyss that had just opened up in the middle of their family business. But I suppose I am asking too much from a daytime drama, expecting them to sit in the quiet horror of mortality without immediately plotting their legal defense. Yet, as RJ pulled Electra into his arms, trying to shield her from the reality of what she had just done, I couldn't help but think of the profound tragic irony of it all. RJ is offering her legal protection, tying himself to her in the most traumatic way possible, while the man she actually loves, the man she was fighting for when she pushed Ivy, remains entirely in the dark. Will Spencer, the ghost in the room, he is out there right now, perhaps standing by the ocean, hollowed out by the belief that he has lost Electra to his rival. He has no idea that the woman he loves has just crossed an invisible, irreversible threshold. The tragedy of Will and Electra's romance is no longer just about misunderstandings or stolen letters. It is now buried under the weight of a corpse. How does a relationship survive this? How does Will look at Electra, knowing that her hands pushed her aunt to her death? The chasm between them is no longer made of Ivy's lies. It is made of Ivy's blood. This is the terrifying illusion of time standing still that I mentioned earlier. Ridge is still having the exact same arguments about the exact same women. Brooke is still meddling in her sister's affairs. But here in this room, time has violently lurched forward. Electra cannot undo the push. She cannot go back to being the naive girl who made a simple necklace. The show refuses to outgrow its tropes, but it occasionally subjects its characters to trauma so severe that they are fundamentally broken, unable to ever return to their original archetypes. I think about my own life, how much has changed since I first started watching these people. I have loved, I have lost, I have moved homes, I have aged. My reflection in the television screen during the commercial breaks shows a face that has lived. Yet I watch Electra trapped in this perpetual cycle of manufactured grief, and I feel a profound sorrow for her lack of agency. She was a pawn in Ivy's game, and when she finally tried to flip the board, she destroyed her own life. It is a bleak, nihilistic view of the world, packaged neatly between detergent commercials. And what of Daphne Rose, the woman who thought she was doing the right thing? The butterfly effect of her confession is staggering. She wanted to clear the air to allow Will and Electra to find their way back to each other. Instead, her words were the loaded gun that Electra fired. The guilt that will inevitably consume Daphne is a tragedy all its own. She will carry the weight of Ivy's death just as surely as Electra will a silent partner in a crime born of good intentions. It is a brutal reminder that in this universe, honesty is often the most dangerous policy of all. As the episode drew to a close, the camera lingered on the marble pedestal, the sharp edge that had ended a life. I found myself going off on a deep philosophical tangent about identity and legacy. What is Ivy Forrester's legacy now? A life spent peering through keyholes manipulating the affections of others? Desperately trying to script a reality that she could control. She leaves behind no great love story, no profound artistic achievement, only a trail of broken trust and a stained carpet in a fashion house. It is a profoundly empty existence, extinguished in a profoundly meaningless way. Electra's future is now a dark, terrifying question mark. The legal jeopardy she faces is immense, but it pales in comparison to the prison of her own mind. She will close her eyes and hear that sickening thud. She will look at her hands and see the fatal push. The love she had for Will, the bright, hopeful future she envisioned, has been eclipsed by the shadow of manslaughter. RJ will try to save her, of course. He will hire the best lawyers. He will stand by her side, but his presence will only serve as a constant reminder of the day her life ended. RJ's complicity in the aftermath is a complex psychological web. He's horrified, yes, but there's a dark, unspoken benefit to this tragedy for him. Electra is now entirely dependent on him. Will Spencer, with his volatile temper and his deep connection to Electra, cannot save her from this. Only the Forrester machine, with its wealth and influence, can protect her. RJ becomes her warden, as much as her savior, binding her to him through shared trauma and legal necessity. It is a twisted, toxic foundation for a relationship built over the literal dead body of the woman who tried to force them together. I sit here, my wine glass empty, the screen now dark, and I feel that familiar, weary exhaustion. We will tune in tomorrow, of course. We will watch the police arrive. We will watch the Forrester family close ranks. We will watch the inevitable cover-ups and the tearful confessions. We are complicit in this voyeurism, returning day after day to watch these beautiful, broken people tear each other apart. We push the boulder up the hill. We watch it roll back down, and we convince ourselves that next time it will be different. But it is never different. The faces change, the collections change, but the pathology remains. The show is a mirror reflecting our own deepest fears of stagnation, our own anxieties about the destructive power of family, and our own quiet dread that we too are trapped in cycles we cannot break. Electra Forrester is crying over a bloody showroom floor, staring at her own hands, and we are right there with her, staring into the abyss, waiting for the commercial break. The silence of the Forrester mansion pool, which I often think of when the show reaches these peaks of hysteria, stands in stark contrast to the chaos of this moment. I often imagine these characters just standing by that calm blue water, simply breathing, simply existing, without the crushing weight of their own dramatic utility. But they are not allowed peace. They are not allowed to simply be. They are cogs in a narrative machine that requires constant friction, constant betrayal, inevitably blood. Ivy's death is just fuel for the furnace, a necessary sacrifice to keep the engine of the show running for another season. And what of the physical space itself? Forrester Creations will hire a cleaning crew. They will scrub the marble. They will bleach the floor. They will probably move the pedestal to a different corner of the room, as if rearranging the furniture can somehow exorcise the ghost of what happened there. The dresses will still be sold. The business will continue. The haunting sameness of the set design will persist, completely indifferent to the human tragedy that occurred within its walls. It is a chilling reminder of the impermanence of these characters in the face of the brand. As I prepare to turn off the television and finally go to sleep, I am left with a profound sense of melancholy. I mourn for Electra, for the girl she was just an hour ago. I mourn for Will, who is about to be dragged into a nightmare he did not create. And strangely, I mourn for Ivy, a woman who lived her life looking through the wrong end of a telescope, entirely missing the beauty of her own existence, while trying to script someone else's. Let us hope that tomorrow brings some small measure of grace to these characters, though I know deep down that the boulder is already rolling back down the hill.